Our Bible reading this morning is taken from Genesis 1, reading verses 26 through to 31. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the air, and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Thanks, Christine. Well, it is Safe Church Sunday, and it's fair to say this is probably not a topic that I imagined that I would be preaching on at some point. But that said, I've spent 10 years working in kids and families ministry, and the catch cry, "safety first," is quite well known to me. But it can be tricky to balance, right? The fun, encouraging vibes plus safety. And I'm not sure if you've ever had to sort of balance those two things, but they're quite important, aren't they? We want to tick both of those boxes. But sometimes I wonder, why do we have this? Why have Safe Church Sunday? Does it just sort of put a downer on everything, particularly when you have to fill in all the forms and, is it really that important? Is it just compliance? Well, I don't think so. I think it is important. That's why we're doing Safe Church Sunday. It's not just because we have to. And kids ministry is not the only area where we have to care about safety. However, it has some great practical examples of why we care about safety. Now, I could have given you many examples, and one springs to mind, so I'm going to take you on a little adventure to kids ministry land to give you an example of why we care about safety. A few years ago, I was working at another church, and I was in charge of a big kids' holiday program. It was lots of craziness, lots of fun, lots of potential for disaster. And I had a lot of teenagers on my team, which sort of, if you've spent much time with teenagers, it sort of increases the fun, but also increases the craziness vibe. But I was really keen to give these teenagers some opportunities to lead, and so I gave 3 of them the responsibility for a messy challenge every day. Think shaving cream and jelly, and you'll get the vibe. They did a wonderful job 4 out of the 5 days, until the last day when they came up to me. They're like, "Karen, we've got an idea." Now, this idea involved a long pole, think like broomstick length, and an ice cream scoop gaffer taped at the end. Tim, I feel like you would be on board with this messy challenge vibe. You would love it. Yeah, nothing could go wrong. Exactly right. It was amazing. And their idea was that in pairs, you would, with your long pole, Zoom people, I'll stay in the picture. With your long pole, you would scoop the ice cream out the punnet, feed the other person, and that was with your long pole that really, in my mind, sort of ended up looking a bit like a spear. Nothing could go. This was heading for disaster, everyone. I don't know if you can imagine this in your head, but disaster was heading for, it was crazy times. Anyway, So these kids came to me with this idea. They were talking it through. They were just getting more excited by this because they were like, there's going to, anyway. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. I see where you're going with this. I see how you're much excitement, but let's just take a moment. And so we had this little moment of self-reflection. We talked about the risks. We affirmed that it was going to be very fun, and so then they thought through that actually ice cream scoops are really solid. That's why they're ice cream scoops. And we talked through what would happen if a kid got shoved in the mouth with an ice cream scoop. And they were like, oh, yeah, I see that could go badly. And they decided that probably wasn't great. And I was like, we're going to shut this down. And we actually ended up coming up with another idea that still involved eating ice cream. Because the key point is that everyone wanted to eat ice cream. And so we were able to balance fun and safety. It was a win all around, and no one got shoved with a spear. And I think for me, this story epitomizes Safe Church Sunday, right? We want to think about why bother with Safe Church. And as we do that, we're going to explore the deeper reasons. Why think about risk? Why fill in all the forms? And although it seems like a silly example, actually that was a really important moment in our kids' holiday program, because it matters whether people feel safe and have fun and feel like they're in a place where they're not going to be hurt. Because at the heart of it, it's actually about people, not forms. It's about loving and caring for people because they're valuable. Now, I know when we say things like, well, we love people because they're valuable, it can actually seem a little generic. Of course we love people. And lots of organisations love people. But we love people. And when we dig a little deeper, we see the idea that every person is worthy of love, respect, dignity and care. Not just because we think those things are important. We actually think they're important because God created that right at the beginning of creation. We see it in our Bible reading today, right there in Genesis 1. It's right there at the very beginning of the creation of the world. These aren't just things we've made up along the way. It's right there at the very start of it all. At the creation of the world, we see God create the waters, the sky, the land, the vegetation, the birds, the animals, and finally people. And people aren't just an afterthought. They're not just in a string of things that God creates. Actually, they're unique. They're special. They're made to be in relationship. And we see this in how the story unfolds. Now, we didn't read the whole of the creation story, but God uses the phrase, and hopefully you've read this before, and God said, let there be light. Let there be, let the land produce vegetation. Let the water teem with living creatures. He uses the same pattern over and over again, but there's a change when God creates people. The pattern changes. It says, then God said, let us make mankind in our image. Notice the difference. Let us. We get a glimpse of the Trinity. People are different from the rest of creation. This is God in relationship. Genesis 1 continues. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God not only created people in his image, but it continues on to say that God blessed them. And when he looked back on all that he had made, God declared it to be very good. These aren't just trite words, they're statements of value. People are inherently valuable because they're made in the image of God. And I wonder sometimes whether we've taken this for granted because we have so much. And sometimes it's important to dwell on the awe of these first moments of creation. When God did everything and we did nothing. Even then, right at that moment, right at the very beginning, people had value. How great is that? There's a theologian, a guy called Kent Hughes, and he writes about the wonder of humanity made in the image of God. And he asks us to consider it like this. He compares it to the wonder of the universe. And so imagine with me, though you could travel 100 times the speed of light, past countless yellow-orange stars, to the edge of the galaxy and swoop down to the fiery glow located a few hundred light years below the plane of the Milky Way. Though you could slow to examine the host of hot stars luminous among the gas and dust, though you could observe close up the protostars poised to burst forth from their dusty cocoons, though you could witness a star's birth, in all your stellar journeys, you would never see anything equal to the birth of a human birth. For a tiny baby girl or boy is the apex of God's creation. But the greatest wonder of all is that the child is created in the image of God, the Imago Dei. The child once was not, now is a created soul. He or she is eternal. When the stars of the universe will fade away, that soul will live forever. How profound is that? We will live forever, outlasting the stars of the universe. We are beautiful, wonderful, creative, ordered, exquisite beings. We have value simply because we are. Simply because we were knitted together in our mother's womb and born gives us value. All the other things on top of that, our personality, our skills, talents, passions, quirks, habits, that we are different and interesting, that we have the ability to grow and learn in a way, I think that's just God showing off. That's God doing his thing. His ability to make people interesting and amazing. It's because we are made in the image of God that we are worthy of love and respect, worthy to be treated well. And it's important that we take time to let that sink in. Take that home today. If that's what you get out of today, of Safe Church Sunday, that's a good thing to take home today. You are worth love and respect. But there's more to take home today, which is that this Safe Church Sunday has implications for us as individuals and us as a church. In my example from my holiday program earlier, there were clearly some safety issues that needed addressing in our messy challenge activity. Imagine if we did not change our activity and the child did have a tooth knocked out. If this was a child's only experience of church, what sort of lasting impression would that leave? Probably not a good one. Not to mention some physical implications of missing a tooth. Imagine feeling like a church didn't care about you because they didn't have a safe program. There are all sorts of ramifications if we don't care about safety. Physical, mental, emotional, psychological. Safety matters. Well, thankfully, as I said, we did change activity, as well as making sure that our program in general was safe. Children loved it. That particular program has been running for 24 years now, and there have been families who have become Christians because of the love and fun that they have experienced at that holiday program. Young people have grown in their faith journey and leadership skills because of that program. Safety is a key part, one of the key parts of being a church community. Because all people are worthy of being treated with respect and love. Because all people, no matter who they are made in the image of God. Now, there are times when the church has done this really well. But we have to acknowledge our corporate sin. There's times when we haven't done this well. There's times when we haven't loved people. There's times when we failed to treat all people as made in the image of God. And that means we have to work hard to ensure that how we treat people is a reflection of how we love them, a reflection of how God loves them as people made in his image. And so that has implications for our church. When people experience a safe place, they're much more likely to feel loved than if they don't feel safe. If right now, while I was preaching, the fire alarm went off and I just ignored it, it would be very hard for many of you to concentrate. In fact, it would be hard for me to concentrate, let's be honest, because it might feel like I was ignoring your physical safety and implying that my words were more important than your physical safety, right? It would seem very counterintuitive, particularly given that today is Safety Church Sunday. Likewise, I think as a church, we want to make sure that what we say, our spoken message, is backed up by everything else. Our physical environment, how we conduct ourselves, our presence in our community in Caulfield and Elsternwick, by how we care for each other, and by the transparency of our processes. Safety matters because love matters more. Our processes and procedures, how we set up our church, how we welcome people, the fact that we have who's done first aid in like little pictures on the wall, these are ways that we show we love people. It doesn't replace other things, and we still do other things like build community and meet in connect groups and those sort of things. But these are some of the ways that we show how we love. We want to be a church that shows the love of Jesus. And a really important practical way that we can do that is to be a safe church. Now, I think it's important to note here that if there are things that you think are unsafe, please let us know. Let me know, let Mark know. That's one of the things that we want to be doing here. But in general, I hope that many of you have been nodding along in agreement, going, yeah, of course. It's like a whole bunch of you have working with children checks. Hurrah. Good work, team. What do we do then? You know, we sort of know the baseline, but are there other things that we can do? Sometimes it's hard to know. You know, if I feel safe, then, you know, does everyone else feel safe? I don't know. Maybe. But I thought I'd give you a few examples from various churches that I've been involved or heard from about wanting to do safety well. What does this actually look like on the ground? So I asked a friend of mine, and he told me a bit about one of the ways that they wanted to help their children feel safe. And so they thought, yep, our kids' program's pretty good. The kids seem to enjoy it, but they thought they could probably do more. They decided to ask one of their 6-year-olds if he would be happy to wear a GoPro, little camera on a hat, for a whole morning of kids' church, and to see what they could discover, what was life like at their church for a 6-year-old. What they discovered was that absolutely everything at their church was above his eye height, including, this is the important point, the "Do you feel safe at church?" posters designed for the children. So imagine if all our how to help children posters were not, anyway, this was their church. And they also discovered that when leaders knelt down to talk to him, they all went like this, "Oh, hi, how are you going?" Which sort of seemed quite condescending instead of like actually just kneeling down and talking to them. The team took that information and asked the kids for their input. How could they make church better for the children? And so then they moved all the posters down to like our waist height, but the kids' eye height. And it showed that they were really listening well. Similarly, another church I know, which has, similarly old building to ours, had struggled with knowing how to make changes so that everyone could access the building safely. The church had no stairs, but the hall had these really awkward stairs. And this is a church that has quite a few young families, but also some older people who struggled with mobility. So they decided to keep a spare walker in the vestry, and they're in the process of investigating a fold-up ramp because of how the stairs are. They weren't able to install a permanent ramp because they wanted to make sure that everyone could go to morning tea. I think both of these churches demonstrate a love for people in really clear and practical ways. Sometimes safe church means asking the people that we don't often listen to, what does it mean for you to feel like you're an included part of our community? Now, every church will have different things to think through as we think about what does safety mean? How are you feeling like you belong here? But we're drawn back to this one principle, this same principle. We care about safe church, not because of a bunch of tick boxes, but we care about loving people. All people are worthy of love because all people are made in the image of God. We might take just a moment as the band come up to lead us in our final songs, just to reflect. Maybe for you this morning you need to really dwell on that message of being loved, being worthy. You are valuable. You are known and loved because you are made in the image of God. Maybe today you want to think about what do you need to feel safe at church? And if there's things that you want to let us know about, please do. And in a moment, the band is going to lead us in our final two songs. And after they have done that, Mark will have some final instructions for us. But we're going to take just a moment and then the band's going to lead us.